You're listening to Head Voice, bringing you inside the minds of the best in contemporary a cappella. I'm Evan, and this week we're joined by the extremely talented Harrison Acosta, who is one of the founding members of Voicebox from UCF. He is their primary and award-winning arranger. Last summer, he was a production intern at the vocal company, and he's done a lot of work at festivals, including as an instructor and a competitor. Speaking of which, he's competing with Voicebox this weekend at the National Acapella Convention in Memphis, Tennessee, so if you're in the area, be sure to check that out. Before we get into it, one last shout out to Lark from UCD. They're currently running a Kickstarter for their new album, and Harrison mentioned them as a big influence for the members of Voicebox. We'll leave a link to that in the show notes, definitely check that out. And without any further ado, episode 7 of Head Voice.
Hello, everyone. We're here with the wonderful Harrison Acosta, and we're so happy to have him here today. The first topic that I'd like to start this little session off with is the concept of group identity. So, back in 2014, you started Voicebox, and I think just in general, an interesting thing is how collegiate groups find their identity and grow as a group and develop their identity. So, one question that I wanted to ask you is before you started the group, did you have an identity in mind before you even got in the group? And I'm just wondering, after it started and after everything picked up, did the identity develop and become more defined over time?
Right, so it definitely changed over time. We went into it, not really sure who we would be, but we knew that we would look towards groups like All Night Yahtzee and SoCal Vocals and Nor'easters, like for inspiration in terms of energy, in terms of how clean they are, or their aesthetic, or like everything that is the Nor'easters. We went into it thinking like we're gonna be this like top 40s pop, really angry group, and oh my god, it changed so much over the year, especially going into year two. But a lot of it happened with trying things out and not doing them super well, and then seeing groups like Lark go out on stage and like destroy everything in their path in such like an inspirational way that we would find what we're good at, which would eventually be like EDM and more playful things for us to do. Like we all watch Hocus Pocus, so a lot of our inspiration comes from Hocus Pocus, like all the time. Sans our ICCA set. As a founding group of 6, there were 6 of us for the first month and a half going in. Being 6 people is very limiting vocally, at least to us. I mean, there's groups like Hexachords like busting down doors, but at the time we were young, we were confused. But we found songs like "Don't" by Ed Sheeran to be easy, or like "Black Widow," "Latch" by Sam Smith, songs that were a bit easier, and we got help from like for me, like my arranging idols like John Smith at the time, and then Tom Anderson or Nick Gerard, who would help us with arrangements or like ideas, or people I would ask questions like to, or people I would see in master classes or workshops in like your local Casa festival. And so that helped because we needed to figure out, or like I needed to figure out how to arrange for 6 people. And then also, this was my first experience in co-ed a cappella. I was previously only all male, like that's all I ever did. And so I was like, what is a girl? Like, what is a girl's voice like as an arranger? So it really took a while to even learn how to arrange for this group. And the 6 of us, also, like the other girls that founded the group with me from an all-female group, they don't know what we do. They don't know how to arrange for males' voices. So it was a bit of a struggle arranging, which I think our identity mostly stems from our arrangements, and the choices that we make as a group. But in like the realm of everything that is music, nothing is really unique. Like everything's been done. So we're trying to be more of like we're some culmination of all the things that we love, and it took a while for us to get there because honestly, most of our first year was just doing things that we saw people do, and like, wow, that's great, we can do that. But that it took a year to really find out that that isn't how you create an identity. You're like trying other people's clothes on without ever like their entire outfits without picking one for you. And it took talking to like Aaron Hackle of Lark and talking to Tom Anderson to like figure out how to create an identity for ourselves. And it was mostly like we went to So Jam that year and we tested out things by doing electronic music because we don't see a lot of groups doing that. And while it's fun, and I think that's something we definitely do, electronic music isn't really an identity to us. It's not. We don't like that's the electronic group, like I suppose. But so it took I think our ICCA set to really find who we were, and it was talking to Tom Anderson about how our groups groups become so inspired, or how do they inspire so many audiences? And the example for us was always Lark. If you talk to my group individually and just ask them their favorite groups, like I promise you, the majority are Lark. They're like, oh, of course, Lark. Like who else? Like Mix, yeah, Mix or Lark, because they're like both Aaron Hackle's groups and they're both amazing. But it took us to realize that we were looking towards acapella for our inspiration, and the next thing that we could do was look to other art forms for our inspiration. And I think we learned that mostly in a class with Erin Hackle. I think she was teaching probably singing in all styles at a So Jam festival, and we're like, well, we've been looking at acapella for so long, and it's great because you see what people do so well, but you don't want to just emulate them. And so for our ICCA set, we did a song from Hocus Pocus, a Disney movie, and we did a song by Little Mix, one of our favorites, and it's mashed up with Carmina Burana, an old opera. And so we looked towards opera for inspiration. We looked towards um, Disney movies, and we looked towards like different fantasy things about witches, because we were like, magic, that's fun. Magic is fun. And then we ended up with a set about magic and Panic at the Disco, which are truly Voicebox's like favorite things. And our identity stems from all these, like, when we go out on stage, we can, sometimes we're us, sometimes we're singing about the things that make us feel the way we feel, and sometimes we're singing about magic, and sometimes we're putting on costumes and going out on stage and just having a good time as if it was like Halloween on stage. And that's like where a lot of our identity comes from, is just playing pretend on stage.
Totally. So you'd mentioned some folks that helped you get off the ground, like Aaron Hackle and Tom Anderson, who you'd presumably met at festivals. So can you speak to how your and the group's festival experiences have kind of informed your choices?
I was in an all male group for 2 years before I joined, or I created Voicebox. And at UCF, there are 6 groups, all fantastic and all very individual. But we travel to festivals together, which is a really interesting thing. And it's also like, for us, it's a great way because we're all together, and like you can't hate the people you're with all the time. So, but we go to SoJam every year, and the first 2 years was such an eye opening experience. Like for me, as like a classical like instrument player, like I was like, what is acapella? Why am I here? And so I went to SoJam, and my first SoJam experience was with Pentatonics opening up for a group called Fork, and I was like, "That's a cappella! Like, you can do that on stage, and like that's legal. It's like so cool." But so going to those festivals, I just saw people doing amazing things, and I'm a very like curious person, so I'm just asking, "How do you do that? Like, how do I do that?" And so it was great, a great learning experience going to my first 2 jams and just trying things out. And then as I made Voicebox, I wanted to branch out, and because I was creating a new group, I needed to figure out what we would do. And while it took a long time to do that, I thought the best way to do that was to go to more festivals and talk to more people, because acapella is so great in that it's such a niche community that like you're not in it for the money. So like if you're in it for the money, and like if you like, okay, let me reword that. Like you're not in it for the money, so like you can't be here and be mean. Like everybody in acapella is so either like they're so nice, or they're so interested in helping you, or they're so interested in meeting new people that like it's you meet so many people who are good at so many different things, and you learn so much from each person. And so I went to SoJam, and then I was like, I need to go to more. I went to All Roads Festival, which is now Betsy. Super cool festival. Such a different format from everything, and even there, so casual. I talked to so many. Talked to like Ben Bram. I talked to Shams. I talked to India Carney. Learned so much. Jesse Mark. So such a funny person. But I went to Laugh. I went to Boss, and I was so happy to be at more festivals. My group laughs every time I come back from a festival. They're like, "All right, here's that 2 week honeymoon period where I like come back and I'm like trying all these new things." Um, and it's also so interesting because like Laugh as opposed to SoJam is such a different dynamic, because the West Coast groups do acapella differently. And then Boss, same thing. You do not see groups in the South doing what Vassar Devils do. Um, or you don't see groups in the South doing like what Akasola does on the West Coast. It's so cool to see so many different types of acapella groups, which is I think another thing that Voicebox was very fortunate to experience. A lot of us go to different festivals, so a lot of us see a lot of things. So we come back and we share all these new experiences, and that's what really like transforms what we do and what choices we make.
And I think I just want to jump back to your arranging experience a little bit. I think one thing that groups don't fully understand is how integrated an arrangement can be to the choreography. So I'm just curious if you have any take on that in particular, and if when you're arranging, if that's something that you think about or you consider.
Yeah. So I take when I'm arranging, I do a lot of the blocking as I'm arranging. Because like none of the parts of acapella are totally like unrelated. Like the visual, the musical, the emotional, it's all tied. So when you're like I highly doubt there's anyone arranging out there that is like arranging in a black room and their mind is completely blank and they're not picturing a stage or what their group is doing. So I often am sitting here thinking like, oh my god, this is great. We're like I'm not gonna say it. We're gonna lunge like, but we're totally not gonna lunge. Don't lunge. Don't do that. Everyone does that. But we like there's no way to do one without the other. So oftentimes I'm like doodling like, oh my god, I can imagine us doing this. One of the more like infamous parts of our set last year. I say infamous, but whatever. We got like we it's a witches set. It's about magic. So the three girls push the group down. We fall to our knees and then we backbend while doing opera. And that was one of the most memorable things that to me from our set. And our group is like the musically. Obviously, there was no cue in the original song. Like, all right, backbend. We were sitting there thinking, what establishes magic? And for as an arranger, you are trying to create all these ideas using just your mouth, but like using just the music, using just the sound. But sound, it does so much, but it can only get you so far. And I think it's so important to integrate both. So not only am I thinking of ideas, I also usually have a lot of my group around when I'm arranging. I always tell them to come over, or like they usually just hang out honestly, and I usually like sit in my kitchen like blaring music over my speakers while I'm arranging. But a lot of times they'll walk over and be like, hey, what if we did this, or they'll be like, guys, what if we did this while we're moving? And so I also always have my choreographers with me. Sometimes it takes a while for like an arrangement to start, so like I don't need them over while I'm like pulling my hair out trying to find the first chord. But usually like halfway through I start having people come over, and they sit around my house, usually watching like Top Model and dancing around while I arrange. But you find so much. You make such better choices when you have more people to make them with. I think like take that directly from Lark. Lark is so collaborative on everything they do, and I truly believe it's why they're so successful. Besides having a story to tell, they do it together and they hear everyone's input. And when it comes down to like creative decisions, you can only make one decision, but every creative opinion matters in what decision to make.
So Voicebox is, a group that's done a lot of competitions, and I
hmm
think that's, a lot of what your group's geared towards. So how do you find that for a group that's, so competitively based, how do you exist outside of, when you're prepping for a competition, or are you always prepping for a competition? Is that the touchstone that like leads your group forward, or like how do you set goals in general?
I think it's important to. I think the goals are obviously important. People ask like, "What do you do when you're not like prepping music specifically for competition?" And I always find it interesting, because I totally understand it. But for to my group and like to me, the music that we do during competition is no different from music that we would do elsewhere. I mean, to be fair, like I'm not saying like everything should be like that difficult or anything, but I don't see a big difference between the music we perform in competition. Like, okay, I'll take a step back. So the reason we go to competition in the first place is so that we can travel, so that we can perform for new audiences, and so that we can, especially perform in sound equipment. We have nothing. We like sing in an arc and outside of our fountain on campus. There's not very many performance spaces at UCF, at least not at the moment. So traveling is so important to us, and I don't really see a big difference in your competition music, because for us, we put everything into each song. So why should we try less hard on a different song or on any other song? And while I say that, like obviously a gig comes by and they're like, "Can you sing the song?" And I'm like, "Sure." I pull out that 4 chord progression, then we stick on some oohs, some words, and we just sing, and then we get it over with and we move on. And that happens. Like I get it, but while you're doing each song, I think for you to do a song truly like really great, you really need to know why you're doing that song. And like groups will go in and they're picking songs for fun and they're blah blah, blah. And like you need a balance. You need like every song. Um, Obviously needs to be fun. You need serious. You need your ballads. You need your blah blah blah. You need there. Everyone has what they want. They have like a list of prerequisites, and like on they need to have a balance set for whatever show they're doing. But when every time we pick a song, we sit down and we need to figure out why we're doing it. Who's gonna sing it? What story are they telling? How can we help them? we don't have all those things, we really can't do that song. And so for us, since every song is truly that important to us, we're just sticking those songs. Like we go to a competition and we're not really creating like this fierce competition set like coming out of the side like I don't know, a left hook. So Voicebox does maybe 12 new songs a year, and all the songs are equally like treated. And so we don't competition's over and we don't like sit back in our chairs. Like we go to competition, great, next thing. I think especially like for directors, it's so important to always have a goal. Like I know one of the struggles I've had so much my first year directing was like we would do something, we would have a concert or go to a competition. You get back, it's over, and it's like 2 weeks of like, don't need to rehearse, goodbye, goodbye, see you soon. So we are also very open about everything that we talk about. So that year we like at the end of the year we're like, well, that happened, that was a problem. And so like all the officers like are aware of that, and so we all come in and we have these new goals, we have these other things to do, this next festival, this next concert, this time to record. You never want to like sit back in your chair and like just let things happen, right?
When you're prepping for all these competitions and festivals, I'm just curious as to what the group mentality is behind all of this, because it's a lot of work and a lot of effort to
Yeah.
put into something that you love so much. And I think you have to be all on the same page. So, what is Voicebox's approach, and how do you guys agree to something?
So I guess it starts with like song selection for us. Um, One thing we know, like we know we like electronic music, we know we like top 40s music, and we know that we like to be weird, I guess, on stage. And people like when we go out and we make the weird choices. And we also know that we're a Panic at the Disco cover band, and so every set we come out and we pick our Panic, and then we build the song around that. Not actually, but we might as well. Um, so for song selections, as opposed to a lot of groups, we don't audition solos. Instead, we pick songs, and while we're picking songs, we're like, "Do we have a soloist? Nope. Okay, great. The song's gone." Because like realistically, when it comes down to it, only one person can sing that song, the best, I guess, musically. Emotionally, so many people have different stories. So I'm not saying like your director goes out there and they pick your one soloist and then you call it a day, because you never know what someone has in terms of solo or storytelling, because it's different. Because while music ability obviously is most important, two people singing at slightly different music abilities, but one way more emotionally attached and one with a greater story to tell or a different story to tell can perform it better. So you need to be open about your abilities. So like when we sit down, we choose a song and we're like, do we have a soloist? Like when I'm picking songs, I'm like, I'm gonna think Susie over there or a little Jimmy over there. I'm gonna be like, all right, you're gonna be the soloist. But we have such an open like atmosphere that we have people. I pick Susie and Jimmy's like, well, I'm pretty sure that I can do it better. Okay, maybe not like that, but like Jimmy will be like, I have this attachment to the song, or I think I can do it in this way. And usually when we have multiple people who are interested, we just like sing it, record it, send it, and we still pick, or at least I still pick, or our officers will discuss it and pick. We try not to spend too much time on it because you don't want to overthink it, and people like if you because we don't want you to, like no one needs to be offended by the fact that like we chose someone over someone else. You wouldn't be in this group if you weren't already talented. So like hold your head up and let's move on. Like the next song, you'll have a solo down the road. Especially because groups get stuck in this. Oh well, Susie has all the solos every year because we keep doing the same top 40s type belt. And a lot of groups fall into that because they're choosing their songs beforehand, and then they're auditioning, and of course Susie's got the best belt, she can belt a G7, of course, throw her in there, throw her into the ring. So when we're choosing songs, we're like, oh, you know what, I think that Susie would sing the song also. Then we're like, well, maybe we should try a different genre, try a different approach, try a different blah blah blah. And so that really helps with that. That being said, no system works with every group, and I definitely going and teaching at different festivals have found that out. And it's really interesting, but it's worth discussing with your group if the system can work, and if it doesn't, how can you make it work, or what can you learn from the system to make your group work with that. And so that's a lot, but that's so important to us and how we're choosing our music, because song selection is such a big step for us, and I think I'm talking a lot about it because I think a big difference for us is that we're so open about everything that we do. As a director, every single person in your group is important, and you need to make sure that you emphasize that because it's just a fact. If they weren't, they wouldn't be in your group, like point blank. With that also, when we formed, we wanted every group has their dramas, but we were like, how can we avoid drama, or how can we not do this or not do this or not do this? You learn from trial and error. And one of the best things we do is we say what's on our mind. Everyone, all the time. You say what you're thinking, and there's no passive aggressiveness. You don't hold anything back, and you get over it. Groups say these are your best friends in acapella. Point of the matter is, not all of them are your best friends, but that doesn't mean you can't make great music, right? You grow close to these people because you're around them all the time. Sometimes they are your best friends, and sometimes some of them are, and not all of them are. But you can put that behind you, like you leave that at the door, and you go in and you make great music. And so that we have that policy of, when you're in rehearsal, you're here to make great music, and you're here to use this music to go through whatever you had during that day. And you share this room, you share like this group with these people, so you have to respect them. And we find that you can't really be sensitive if you're going to make great music, because my job is to point out your flaws, and I'm sorry about it, but I'm also not sorry about it because we're trying to make great music. Pretty sure Deke Sharon said this at a masterclass where he was talking about how your group may be 95% amazing, but I'm still only going to focus on the 5% because that's my job in rehearsal. And I probably should compliment you more. I don't have exactly time all the time to tell you how great you are, but know that you are like 95% amazing. And why stop at 95% when we can continue to like bunker out knock out those other 1%, right? And sometimes it just takes your group knowing that. Like our first year it wasn't all perfect, but we were getting better because we talked about everything that was on our mind, and every time something happened to somebody, we went through it together because we talk about it, and it's just part of acapella, and it's part of college, and it's part of life. Our next year, we were more vocal about it. We were more vocal about how we felt, and we told each other how we felt about everything. And if you have a problem with someone, you speak up, because there's no point in holding it. Like, get over it, talk about it, get through it, move on. Like, sure, you don't talk in rehearsal. You shouldn't talk when you're teaching, but there's so much personality, and we make it so that you're never like hiding that. You're never trying to like, you're not like suppressing yourself. Like you're speaking your mind, and because we're all so opinionated, you have to have a system, obviously, and we have a couple systems that work in rehearsal, but everyone is so adamant about what they want, and they're so willing to work for it. And it's honestly because we know how much work you need to put in, that we all are okay with like, oh, say what's on your mind. Like, yeah, Susie, you're 40 cents flat. I don't know how you're singing in that key, but it's not the key we're in. And they're like, thanks, Jimmy. But like, you get over it and you move on.
Susie and Jimmy are my favorite a cappella duo. Really looking forward to that album. But well, clearly the group dynamic stuff and your goal setting and everything is working out, because I just want to impress to listeners how crazy it is to start a group and then 2 years later be at ICCA finals. That's nuts. But in the more immediate future, you guys are recording an album right now that you're going to be working on. I was wondering if you could just talk about what your vision is for that, how that process is going to work, what you're excited about with that project.
Like, we're so excited. We're so excited to record with a vocal company to make our album. They've really helped us since we formed. Actually, like the 6 of us founding members, talked to them a lot about like, how do we do this? What is acapella? How do we acapella? And they were fortunate enough to help us with arrangements, with everything. And so 3 years later, finally recording an album. So if you don't know, it's titled This Side Up. Any chance to make a box pun, we will make it. If we can find a way to print our album on cardboard, it will happen. I promise. And so again, I guess it's like identity to us. Like, how can we, if this is the only album we make in 30 years, how can we make this one the greatest? Obviously, that may not happen next year. Hopefully, record more. But if this was our like last hurrah, what would be on it? And so we're trying to like capture all the things that make a voicebox. And obviously, the first track on our album, at least I think it's the first track. Who knows? It may not be in 3 months. But as of right now, it is. It's Lightning, which was our super magic witch EDM opera thing from last year's ICCA set. I think that is fundamentally one of the most voice box things we do, along with all of our Panic at the Disco songs. This is Gospel is returning. Crazy equals Genius. We're trying not to do only Panic songs, so we're not doing all of them. But if we could, we would. and maybe in like 5 years we'll release a separate EP titled Panic. But it took us sitting down, figuring out what songs were our favorites, and then we would ask a bunch of friends like, "Hey, when you think Voicebox, what songs do you think?" And it's really hard to narrow down. But we figured, especially like we do this music for us, right? But obviously we're not the only people listening to it. So we needed to pick what was our favorite, but also what is our favorite may not immediately be us all the time. So like one of our favorites is Sunday Candy. But it's not always the most us thing. Like we're not a super gospel group, but it'll be a great time.
So I think we're nearing the end of our podcast session today. So one question that we like to close off all sessions with is, what is one thing that excites you about acapella and the acapella community, and what's something that you're looking forward to in the coming years?
Oh gosh, what a question. Things that excite me. I think things on the immediate mind right now are like that I'm leaving Voicebox, and so I'm like excited to see where Voicebox goes after this. I've spent such a long time like preparing them and preparing the new officers for years to come, so that I know that they're gonna do like great things. But I'm excited to see them make new decisions and make like get new members, and that changes the image, it changes the personality, and for everybody, don't be afraid when your group changes identity because it happens. We talk about instrumentation, I guess, like for our group all the time, and we're like, well, if no good guys come around, we're gonna be all female next year, and like literally, it could happen. I promise you. I wait one day, Voicebox is all female. When the next week, it's all male. It happens. So I'm really excited to see where they go. In like I guess the next semester. In the more immediate future, we're going to NACC in a couple weeks, and I'm so excited because that's a festival I haven't gone to, and it's such a different dynamic. And One Voice is there, and I'm ready to see One Voice, and I'm ready to cry, and I'm gonna talk about it again in a couple weeks, and then I'll cry while I'm talking about it because that is my life. So like I can only imagine how like Boston, Laugh, and SoJam have affected Voicebox. So I can only imagine how NACC is gonna affect Voicebox. So that I'm really excited for. I cannot wait. I mean, it should be dead, but it's not dead. Like the Geneva, Genevenado, like that kind of realm is like on its way out. So I'm excited for that to be out. I'm really excited to see what the next trend is. I cannot tell you what it is. I hope it's electronic acapella because I work with groups like Faux Pas over the summer. But I think electronic is like I don't know if it's the next thing I'm gonna see, but it's like what I'm hoping for. I'm like on the side, like cheering for electronic music. Um, Separately, I just like found Tank and the Bangers, and I like just wish that groups will go folk or like not folk, what is it? Folk, so, like soul and like funk and like R&B and like jazz and blues and all that stuff. We did our first funk song last year, and I thought it was gonna be a disaster, and honestly, it was for most of it. And then towards the very end, we're like, guys, we're doing it wrong, and so we had to like research it and like understand more about it. But I think that is like a trend that I want to see. I saw a bit of it with Afro Blue long ago. Of course, they've changed their name now, but they used to be my favorite group, like hands down. Them and Aurora, like bless Aurora for the rest of my life. But I want to see more of that.
Absolutely. Us too, for sure. We'd like to see the same thing. Well, thank you to Harrison for coming in this week. And we hope you'll join us next week for a new episode of Head Voice.